Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games and giant thunder lizards. Solosaurus is sponsored by Stone Valley Games, your friendly, distant game store. Visit them at stonevalleygames.com. And now, here come your hosts, stomping through the underbrush, Michael and Martin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 86 of the Solosaurus podcast, our first episode of 2022. Woohoo! I'm Michael Eckenfels.
And I'm the revolutionary fighter version of Martin Gonzalez, which will become clear in a few seconds. But we know that we've been pretty inconsistent with our release schedule these past few months because, well, life gets in the way. We are promising to have a more consistent release schedule in 2022.
And I got to insert here. I appreciate everybody who's been very supportive of that. And it's nice to see when our numbers remain the same and don't go down because of an inconsistent release schedule. But yeah, it's been a little crazy life-wise recently.
And I mean, to that point, we received some really nice comments and supportive messages on our Facebook group from our lovely and sweet listeners. So thank you for your understanding and support. And we will try to reciprocate by being more consistent with our release schedule.
Absolutely. And we read each and every one of those comments and take them to heart. So we really do appreciate all of them. So today on the show, we're going to review Days of Ire, Budapest, 1956. But first, a word from our sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by Stone Valley Games, your friendly distant game store. Check them out at stonevalleygames.com or look them up on Facebook under Stone Valley Games. And here we go for the solo news. So brought to you as always by tablefor1.me, where Solosaurus gets its news exclusively for one-player game news. Did that come out right? Okay, that was good enough. Thanks as always to Frederick Schultz of tablefor1.me for his ongoing efforts to bring us the solo gaming news.
This is where Michael is reduced to. He's like, just keep rolling. We'll do it live.
Yep. I need more cowbell. Okay. First of all, publisher Flanks has launched a crowdfunding campaign on GameFound to bring a game called Purple Haze to fruition. Set in 1967 during the Vietnam War, for 1 to 4 players, they will take on the roles of U.S. Marines as they try to trek their way to safety following a helicopter crash. Combining a narrative campaign with tactical squad-based combat, Purple Haze will span over 8 missions during which your squad will have to face harrowing situations and make tough decisions along the way out of the jungle. At the start of each mission, you'll be given a primary and secondary objective to complete. Regardless of your success or failure, you'll progress on to the next mission, but the rewards you'll receive for completing the mission may prove to be critical for the entire campaign. Marines in your squad will develop capabilities and specializations between missions by gaining hard-won experience. This will, however, be offset by the mental and physical injuries that they'll suffer during these missions. So before I ask your opinion, Martin, I got to say, I know you tagged me on Facebook and you brought it to my attention, but I had already had it on my radar. I had actually signed up for an email notification on it, and I forgot about it promptly. And then as soon as you tagged me, I was like, oh, yeah. And I looked at it and I saw tactical combat. I'm like, I'm not so much into that. But then I started looking at it more closely in preparation for this show, and I'm like, do I need to do this? Have I made a resolution to not buy more board games? And
Me too.
Right. So what do you think, Martin?
There's nothing wrong with looking. We're just looking, Michael. There's no harm there.
No. We're not, we can touch too, maybe. But taking it home, no.
So I'll tell you what interests me about this. And I'm kind of right there with you. The kind of tactical combat is probably the least interesting thing to me about this game, which is weird because it's probably the bulk of this game is playing it is the combat. But I love the theme. I've always been a sucker for Vietnam conflict, games, and the fact that it's kind of a narrative game. And that whether you succeed or fail, you're achieving your objectives, you'll still move on, but you just won't get the rewards. That is interesting to me, and it's kind of reminiscent of Arkham Horror, the card game, right? Where
Hmm.
no matter what happens in the scenario, you do move on, but you just kind of have to deal with the consequences of not um, completing the objective. So there's a kind of narrative, kind of your decisions matter thing here that's kind of speaking to me.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's kind of like making me think it's basically Arkham Horror, the card game, but in Vietnam, and it's kind of tantalizing because are you getting a kind of weird war vibe, kind of supernatural vibe from this, or am I just like imagining it?
You might be imagining it, but you
Okay.
might not be wrong. I mean, I didn't dive that deeply into it. I looked at the page and I actually downloaded the quick start guide so I can read it later because
Mm,
I might go in on it. I don't know. But that's a good point. I mean, that would make an interesting addition to the game, but I don't know how that would be received for people expecting a Vietnam War
mm,
story. I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah,
That would be interesting.
it'll be interesting. All right, our next news item is about the game Final Girl, a very obscure game from Van Ryder that nobody's heard about and didn't make any money at all on Kickstarter. I'm being facetious, of
Right.
course. Uh,
Right.
I believe there was a time when Final Girl was the most successful tabletop game Kickstarter of all time. I don't know if it's been surpassed, but their first season made a lot of money, and so this is season two, which we're talking about here. So, as you know, Final Girl is a solitaire game themed on the famous movie trope with the same name and is getting a second series, as publisher Van Ryder Games has launched a crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter. So, building on the foundation of the popular Hostage Negotiator, which I do have a copy of, I'm looking at it right now. In Final Girl, you take on the role of the last survivor, enacting bloody vengeance upon your antagonist, plucked straight from the horror cinema masterpieces. The game is built upon a system appropriately titled Feature Films, each themed on a popular movie franchise, and characters that get integrated to the core game system, similar to Unsettled from publisher Orange Nebula. First series of Final Girl turns out to be a huge success, and Van Ryder Games is definitely pulling out all the stops for this second season into horror-themed solitaire board game extravaganza. As well, introducing 5 new feature film modules, each themed on beloved horror movies like the Alien franchise. We never mentioned that here
Hmm.
on this podcast.
Never heard
And
of it.
and cult classic film The Thing, to name but a few of the new additions to the
Hmm.
roster. The Kickstarter campaign for Final Girl Series 2 offers a staggering array of options to also pledge for content from the first series, as well as collector's edition boxes to store all of this pulpy content in appropriate fashion. At this time, the Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign for Final Girl Series 2 has surpassed its funding goal many times over. Target delivery date December 22. So, Michael, did you go in on the original Final Girl?
So this podcast costs a little bit of money to produce, as you know. I mean, it costs a little bit of money to subscribe to this service to do the recordings, and it costs a little bit of time to create and such. And it also costs money when we see games that we just gotta go in on. And here's another example, a shining example of this. Yes, to answer your question, I didn't do the Kickstarter campaign. I came in late to the deal, and I went in on the full package for Final Girl Season 1 because I was just in love with the theme. I mean, child of the 80s, grew up on slasher films. They're absolutely laughable now, but back then they weren't. And it just had that same feel. And also Hostage Negotiator trappings, which I do like that game. So I went in all on it, and I saw Season 2 was being announced. I can't remember if it was on a Facebook group or what, but I saw it and I was like, don't need it. Don't care. I've got the first one. I need to play that. That was my resolution after all. And so for preparation for the show, I looked at Season 2 and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Alien theme, thing theme. Oh, come on, man. And I looked at the pledges and I'm like, I've got the core rules, but that doesn't matter. The only way to get all of those film boxes is to go in at the 159 level, which includes the core set anyway. And I'm just like, oh, well. And the minis, though. The minis are awesome. I got the minis for, like I said, I went all in on Season 1 or Series 1 and got the minis for that too. And I'm just like, I can't wait to try this out. But I'm like, oh man, I'm going to have Season 2 before I get Season 1 to the table, Is that how it works? I don't know. I'm kind of new to this. I've not done this a lot.
Well, okay, so you haven't played Season 1. Has it arrived?
No.
Is it?
Yeah. I've got it. It's in my closet right now. I've just recently, like I said, using that BG Stats app that you turned me on to get everything organized, and I've got 281 games right now, plus maybe a couple on the way right now. I don't know. Just some magazine games that I had found, but nothing major. So
it's great. Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's pretty awesome, and it's really easy. It's a lot easier to do that than to write it down on a pad of paper and then have to go to my computer and enter everything. So thank you for that. But yeah, to answer your question, sorry, I go off on a tangent sometimes. It's sitting in my closet right now. Yeah, with all my other games.
Okay, here's a question for you. Have you played Hostage Negotiator?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
How do you feel about Hostage Negotiator?
I like it. It's good.
Okay.
It's maybe a little too random for some folks, but I enjoyed the feel for it, and I could see the story enveloping in my head. And enveloping? Did I say enveloping? I could see the story developing, unveiling itself in my head. Use words good. Okay. So I like it. I never bought any of the expansion packs, although I had my eye on them for some time. I just never went in on it. I still have it. I never got rid of it. So yeah, I'm excited to try it finally, and I might do that here pretty soon because I really want to give it a shot. And if it's because I want to play this first before I go, okay, let's do season 2.
Yeah. There's definitely it's intriguing to me, but there was a time when I first discovered Hostage Negotiator several years ago. I played it over and over and over again. And I kept losing.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Because it's one of those games where, and you see this a lot on the social media where people will say, Hostage Negotiator, it's too random, and I hate it. And then at first blush, if all you do is rely on the die rolls, then yes, because that's kind of the point of the game is you're not going to win if you just keep rolling dice and relying on random number generation. So you have to kind of it's a game of mitigating randomness by sacrificing cards or by hoarding cards, which means sometimes you're going to have to give in to kidnapper demands or stuff like that, whatever. So you can't just play it straight, turn by turn, rolling dice. You're going to lose. You have to make tough choices with your cards, and then that's where the game starts to open up. And so once I realized that, and then once I started winning, then I had more fun with it. But that I'm all played out with Hostage Negotiator is what I'm getting to, and so that's kind of how I felt with Final Girl. It's like I know that they took some of the feedback and issues with Hostage Negotiator, and supposedly they addressed them, reduced some of the randomness, et cetera, but I don't know. I'm no longer interested in diving in. And also because, like you, I have a resolution to try to buy less this year. In fact, here we are. We're recording. We're recording this at the end of January, and I've only purchased one game. It wasn't even brand new. It was secondhand from a Board Game Geek seller, which I'll talk about later. Rise to Nobility, but yeah. So and anyway, like the last thing I'll mention is I don't expect to buy anything or to get anything new until the end of March, which we can talk about later. That's kind of where I am right now.
Nice, very good.
Yeah.
Well, on that tangent, my only acquisition that should come out this year is 11, the football-based, European soccer football.
But you backed that last year.
Yes, I did. I did.
So it doesn't
but I'll
count.
get it this year. Oh, it doesn't. Oh,
no. If you spent the money last year, that's a last year's purchase. That's
yes,
how it works.
Did. And I sold board games I bought in order to pay for it to make sure it passed judgment appropriately.
You're good.
I won't be when I go in on Purple Haze in season 2. We'll see. All right.
We'll see how it goes.
So next item, publisher Cogito Ergo.
Cogito Ergo Meeple.
Cogito Ergo Meeple, which I believe translates as "I think therefore I'm a meeple."
Yes, that's exactly what it translates to.
That's pretty cool. So these guys with the cool name are gearing up with a Kickstarter launch of a game called Solar 175. an upcoming Euro-style legacy game designed for 1 to 5 players by authors Madeline Adams and Joseph Adams. In true Wayland-Yutani fashion, players will assume the roles of a newly appointed CEOs who will stop at nothing to establish or expand their company's reach far beyond the stars, whilst simultaneously trying to outmaneuver the competition. Solar 175 is an epic Euro-style. Oh, we already read that. Sorry. I'll read it. I'm sorry. Solar 175 is an epic Euro-style legacy experience, as I said, for 1 to 5 players, set in a dystopian sci-fi future. It utilizes bag building, area control, and worker placement. It is inspired as a fusion between classic Euro games such as Orlan and El Grande, and a unique thematic and evolving universe. I assume I said Orlan correctly because you didn't correct me.
I hope so. I would say Orleans, but
Orleans. Okay,
yeah.
Orleans. I am not a Orleans. I would have said Orleans, like New Orleans, but anyway.
Right.
So Solar 175 is set in a prosperous, expanding solar system with immersive world building and engaging narratives. The game is rich on theme and will feature interesting ethical and philosophical choices, as well as engaging Euro-style gameplay. The winner is the player with the most influence points at the end of the game. Influence points can be gained via many different strategies, such as helping to build giant megastructures, influencing the upcoming election, and building outposts across the solar system. Play continues until one player has built all of their 15 unique outpost tokens, which triggers the election phase and endgame scoring. Solar 175 has an innovative endgame scoring system which changes based on how the players interact with the game world. This creates unique winning conditions in each game, making each one feel fresh and distinctive. The Legacy campaign contains dozens of hours of content with engaging narrative and multiple endings. Once complete, the game is fully replayable, and the game world continues to expand and evolve endlessly, as the publisher says. It sounds interesting. If it's got some Wayland-Yutani in it, I'm all in, especially if there's some kind of philosophical choice where you have to go after xenomorphs. That would be awesome. So anyway, Martin, what do you think?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff here that, when I was reading this, when I was researching this news item, leapt out at me, kind of got my solo spidey senses tingling. So first of all, dystopian sci-fi future, bag building, which Orleans is a bag building game. Haven't played it yet. I don't own it yet, but I've read a lot about it. It's one of the best, supposedly, by reputation. And worker placement, obviously. Area control, I'm not so big of a fan of, but depends on how they implement the area control there. I'm not really a big fan of risk style area control or whatnot, but it doesn't sound like it sounds like this game is more of a Euro and really will emphasize the kind of worker placement and point salad elements. And maybe area control is just like a way to, I don't know. Here I am starting to make assumptions about this game, but yeah. So there's I'll keep an eye on this one because it has certain buzzwords that are catnip to the kind of gamer I currently am.
All right, cool. And that was the solo gaming news for this episode. Thanks as always to Frederick Schultz of TableFor1.me for these news items.
Thanks, Frederick.
So, Martin, what have you been playing lately?
So I know we keep saying this every episode, but we really need to come up with a better title for this segment, or turn it into a jingle. What have you been playing?
Yeah, Oh, that's perfect. We got it right there. So, what have you been playing? There. Now I just got to put those two together. And what have you been playing?
Oh,
anyway.
Boy. There you go. This is our first episode that we're recording for the year, as we've already mentioned, and I played a lot of games, surprisingly, over the holidays with my family. So that wasn't solo. These were solo games that I played solo, most of them, but I didn't play them solo. So I don't know if I should even go through these things. But I will mention that I introduced It's a Wonderful World, which is a to my family, and I was surprised that they liked it. If you haven't heard of this game, it is a tableau builder. It's a fast card game, and I really like it. So I played that with my family, and they liked it. And as well, the other game I'll mention is Cascadia, which does in fact have a solo mode. This is by Flat Out Games. It is a abstract puzzle game with a theme of these are animals and wildlife and from the Pacific Northwest. Very, very nice theme. Very great kind of pastoral, kind of peaceful art. And my family loved it. They fell for it hard. They requested to play it like again and again, and we played it on multiple days. It was great.
Nice.
And as it turns out, because I'd gone in on the Kickstarter, but prior to getting my Kickstarter copy, I'd made a deluxe print and play copy of it. So at the end of it, I told my brother and sister-in-law whose house we were staying in, hey, I'm leaving this copy with you so that you guys can, kind of enjoy it, because I've got a Kickstarter copy back home. So I left my Kickstarter edition of Cascadia with them, since it was a surprise to me. Like usually like, I'll introduce a game and they're like, yeah, whatever, and then just like, wow, they really, really fell for Cascadia. So
cool. Very good.
Yeah. The game that I've been playing, like legit solo game that I've been playing just yesterday. I've been trying to learn it for a few days, and I finally got over the hump yesterday. It's a game called Rise to Nobility, and it's designed by a whole bunch of people, but the art is by the Miko, who's done art for a few games. So
one or two, right?
One or two. But essentially, it is a mid-weight economics Euro game where you are landowners in kind of this medieval, place, and you've got a main board with many guilds and many places to place your workers, and it uses dice as workers. And basically, the game is you are trying to entice settlers to come and stay on your lands, and then you build houses for them, and then once you've got them settled, then you try to get them apprenticed to the guilds and try to extend your influence. And it's very Euro. Like you're trying to increase your reputation and you're trying to get victory points. So, but I don't know. Just I'm really having a lot of fun with it. Rise to Nobility. This is a game from 2018. These are the same people who made Cavern Tavern, which I haven't played yet. But apparently Cavern Tavern is also art by the Miko, as well Merchant's Cove, which I've mentioned before. Apparently they all take place in the same universe, in the Cavern Tavern universe. So I hear. So anyway, those are the games that I've been playing lately. How about you, Michael?
Well, maybe not recently, but a couple months ago, I got a new game to me called Coffee Roasters.
Okay.
And I tried it once, and I made probably a cup of poison, I think. I'm pretty sure. I did terribly at it. I didn't play it again, not because I hated it. I was just like, okay, when I have time, I'm going to look at this more closely, because there's obviously really good strategies to figure this out. And I did terribly. I don't think you can even drink what I made.
I've played that game. It's a bag builder. It's very relaxing. Yes.
Very different for me. I'm still getting into that mode, but yeah, that was kind of a fun thing to do, especially because I love coffee. So hey, good game. I did also play HeroQuest. I played 3 missions. Now this is the newer release of HeroQuest, not the 1989 version, which I used to own too. I believe I got that as a Christmas or a birthday present back then, but I ended up selling it a few years ago because I just wasn't playing it. And really, honestly, I want to say it's limited to an extent of that you can play it. Now, you can play it solo because this recent version actually has an app out. So the app takes the role of the dungeon master, and it's got really good sound effects. It's really good narrative. It's a good immersive experience. But after having shelled out what I did for it, as well as the 2 expansions, I'm going to play through it all and experience it. But I think at that point, I'm going to trade it or get rid of it, because the replayability just isn't there, because the dungeons are created, they're generated, and they don't change. Monster placement doesn't change. And it's pretty straightforward. You roll the dice, you move, you take an action, like search for treasure, search for traps, attack a monster, roll dice, they roll to defend against it. if you get more hits, then they get defense shields, then you beat them, and there's an objective at the end. You got to go somewhere. And it's straightforward. It's pretty uneventful, but in a way, I think I like it more than I like the D&D board games, which don't make a lot of sense to me, because in those you have a tile that's on the board, you got your characters on there, a monster appears, you fight the monster, but if you move to the edge of the map tile, it creates a new map tile, which inevitably has more monsters on it. So why would you move to the edge of the map tile until you defeat that monster that's you're fighting already? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, unless I'm just looking at it wrong. But anyway, this has a little more immersiveness than that. It's very old school feel, very basic characters: barbarian, dwarf, elf, and magic user. It's good, straightforward fun. For the cost, I don't know that's really worth it, but there you go. Yeah. It's enjoyable for what it is right now, but once I'm done with it, I'll probably be done with it.
Well, I think the big thing about HeroQuest is the nostalgia factor, right? A lot of folks grew up with HeroQuest. In fact, I was in a work meeting with a colleague, and he saw like the 300 games behind me, and then rather than trying to mention something in my collection, he goes, "Hey, do you know HeroQuest?" And I'm like, "No." As it turns out, I do. I mean, I've heard of it, but I didn't grow up here in the U.S., so it wasn't part of my, kind of like childhood experiences. So and then I could feel like, he wasn't as excited anymore after I said I didn't know I didn't have HeroQuest.
Yeah. The last time I played it was like 95 with my original version with some friends from work, and after that there was no app back then, so you couldn't play it solo. It's just you got a mission book that lays out the dungeon, and you only lay out the pieces that the adventurers can see as the dungeon master. So you've got us against them. You need at least 2 players to do it. Right. But with the app, solo play, absolutely. Nice.
Cool.
I also got Mini Rogue recently, which I saw posted in one of the Facebook groups. I think it was a BG41. Might have been Anthony that posted it. I can't remember, but it's a very fun. What do I want to call it? It's like a roguelike game in that you have one character and you go through a dungeon that's generated by card play, and you usually have a choice. It's what direction you want to go in, and then when you get to the last card, you go down a level, and you are managing resources. You're trying to gather more. Strangely, as you're going through a dungeon, you run into merchants who are just randomly there to sell you things, which I guess you go where the business is, right? Defeat monsters, and once you get to the very bottom level, you defeat the last bad guy, and you win the ultimate prize, which is a ruby, I believe, called Ogsblood. And that's it. You win. Yay. Yeah. But I haven't gotten that far. I suck at it.
Well, do you have this is because I've played the print and play version of this, which is a 9-card game. Is yours a 9-card game?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Yeah. No, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I like it. I'm going to keep trying it. I mean, I'm terrible at it, and I keep getting killed, but hey, live and learn. But that speaks to how much fun it is that I keep wanting to go back to it. So
yeah, and it doesn't try. It's a game that doesn't try to be anything more than it is, right? Because it's only a 9-card game. But it is a game that delivers a lot more fun factor for just like a few components and just smart design, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It reminds me of One Deck Dungeon to an extent. It's another game that I like that I haven't played it in a while, but I still got it, and I want to play that again just because it reminds me of that. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I like this kind of stuff, because it's easy to get into and quick to play, and it's not a brain burner.
Well, One Deck Dungeon is a little bit more involved because of all the dice placement and mitigation and so on and so forth.
True. Yeah.
The other thing, the one time I've only won Mini Rogue one time, and it was because I was on the second level. No. I think I was on the first level, and then I fell into a pit, and I fell to the second level.
Right.
So I didn't have to finish the rest of level 1, and then on the third level I fell into another pit, and I ended up on the 4th level, and then I went into the final battle, and I'm like, this is it. I'm just going to die. But I just got super lucky with my die rolls, and I killed Og.
Nice.
And I think I fireballed him. You threw a fireball spell at him, but so that was a rush, but that was really so. Kind of like paradoxically, the only way I've won the game is by skipping out on major sections of the game to be able to just rush to the final battle and then get super lucky in the final battle.
Yeah, I mean there are a lot of levels. I think there's 4 levels, but each level has a number of areas, and the first has 2, and the other 3 have 3 each. So we're talking 11 card areas to go through, and that's a lot. So
Yeah.
I never ran into that. I kept running into traps that sucked away my experience, so I never leveled up in the 2 plays I had. So anyway, that's a mini rogue. That's an enjoyable little game. Another one that I really liked, Hunted Mining Colony. Yeah, Hunted Mining Colony 415. This,
Okay.
I know you've played it. I got
Yeah.
it from I've got it from Stone Valley Games. I got I don't know what it's called. It's not a Kickstarter version, but it has extra content in that. It has extra tokens and a couple of extra location
Yeah.
cards.
And let's be clear, this is really Aliens, the board game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you play as a crew member who is part of a ship that I believe responded to a distress signal at this mining colony, and you start off the game deep inside the mining station trying to find your way back to the landing pad. And along the way, you're trying to get equipment, you're trying to get your crew members, you're trying to not get killed by the aliens. You have a pulse rifle with a limited amount of ammunition, and it's got a really cool mechanism where you do tests and do combat, not by die rolls, but by tossing tokens. So it's a dexterity thing into a box, and you're trying to get them within this circle or area on this alien card. And if you do, it's a success. If not, you fail. And I played it twice, and the first time I made it all the way to the landing pad, and the queen killed me. I got 2 hits on her. She could take 3, and she killed me.
So close.
Right, very close. And the second time I played it, I made it to the second location, and I died.
And what's cool about it is that the tokens are all different sizes and shapes.
Right.
Kind of indicate, well, this size and shape, that's a pulse rifle, but this is a grenade, and this is so that's kind of cool.
It is. The only thing about it I don't like design-wise is the card art on the back and the front is the same. So the orangey kind of, I like the art, but when a card is face up or when it's flipped over at a glance or from my peripheral vision, it looks the same. So a couple of times I would draw a card, or when I discard it, I would discard it into the draw deck accidentally. And I realized pretty quick what I was doing, but I was like, wait a second. No, this goes here. So I had to rotate the discard pile 90 degrees so I could see that, and it's just, that was kind of an odd design choice. But other than that, I just love this game and I'm going to keep trying it.
Nice.
Other than that, yeah, absolutely.
That is designed by our good friend Gabe Barrett.
There you go.
And I actually I produced and played the print and play preview version of this game when it was on Kickstarter a couple of years ago.
It's awesome enough that I want to look into what's the other one? Tower? Hunted
Kobayashi Tower.
Kobayashi. I almost said Nakatomi, and it's like, nope, that's the movie. Anyway.
Yeah, for copyright reasons, we can't say Nakatomi.
We just said Nakatomi, though. You just said.
Darn it.
Demonetized.
I hope they do. I hope they don't come after us.
Nah, not that we're monetized in the first place. So anyway, otherwise, I've got Absolute War, the Russian Front, 1941 to 1945 on my table right now. This is a GMT game, which is solo capable. I like it because it's got very high level units, armies, and corps. It's area control, so you're not having to deal with a billion hexes. It's card driven, so you gain resources and such from that. But it's funny, when I'm sitting down and reading the rules to this, I don't know if I'm finding my tastes are changing or what, because after reading through the manual for Hunted, the manual for Mini Rogue, the manual for HeroQuest, Coffee Roasters, etc., I'm going, do I really like war games still? I mean, I do. Don't get me wrong, I do. But
this is huge, folks.
It's so. It's not really. It's so. I'm still going to stick with it. It's just so much to deal with. I mean, it's levels and unit sizes and colors and shapes, and it's just so much to it. And I'm like, am I just done with this, or am I? I'm going to keep doing it. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just like, am I turning a corner? Am I getting to that point? I don't know.
Well, I was looking at the list here in our outline of your games that you chose in the So What Have You Been Playing, and there's 5 games here, and only one of them is a war game. And I was like, Michael, what have you? Who are you, and what have you done with Michael? You're clearly a body snatcher.
Oh, I know. Well, here on my desk, I've got Operation Coronet and Olympic and Coronet, which is a solitaire game from Decision Games on the hypothetical invasion of Japan in 1945. I've got Dan Viersen Games, DVG's Gato Leader, which is a solo submarine game. So, I've got war games aplenty. It's just, getting into it now, I'm beginning to have a realization that I'm like, I might like these simpler rules better just because time. effort. Back in the day, I could get through an Avalon Hill book no problem, but now it's like, oh my Lord.
It's real.
It is.
We have so little time now with so many real world responsibilities, and sometimes you just want something easy and light to get through, and then just kind of play to have fun and not really wade through nested outline form sub numbered rules.
But to this particular game's credit, it has a basic mode which I'm trying to learn right now, and it's very simple. So I think I'll try that before I get it off my table and get to maybe Final Girl. But simple is good if that gets me into it, and then I want to try the more advanced game. Maybe I'll do that where it adds partisans and all kinds of other stuff. We'll see.
The funny thing about this, since we're on this topic of you kind of not necessarily, but like moving a little bit away from war games, is I got a message from a friend of mine, Michael, a different Michael, and he sent me a link to something that's coming up on Kickstarter, I think, and he goes, and I clicked on it, and I'm like, oh, it's a David Thompson game. It's Soldiers in Postman's Uniform. And I'm like, yeah, I'm aware of this. And David talked about it when he came on the show. And, so he goes, Michael says to me, you seem to be into war games like that with the Vietnam game that you talked about recently. And with because I've been, posting about the game that we're reviewing today, Days of Ire. So it seemed up your alley. And I'm like, really? I'm not really a hardcore war gamer. I don't know where you're getting that. So as you, Michael, are kind of, shedding your war gamer greatcoat, I might be picking it up.
Well, I don't think I'm not going to ever completely turn away from war games. Like David Thompson's stuff, Pavlov's House, Soldiers in Postman's Uniforms, Castle Itter, and then his upcoming Lazarinth Ridge, I believe it's called.
Yeah.
I love those games because they're so easy to get into. They're simple. The mechanics are easy to comprehend. It's not, 16,000 pages of nested rules that drive you nuts. I mean, but still, it's about the experience. Is what kind of an experience do you want from your game? If it's a war game, do you want a really detailed and satisfying experience? And you better put in the time. But it's like, I do, but I don't want to spend that kind of time. So what do? There's options. So, we'll see. I love my war games. We'll see. I'm still going to talk about them. I'm still going to try them.
All right.
I think, as you said, I've got more Euro style games on my list here than I do war games right now, but we'll see if that changes.
You're still the same, Michael. You haven't been taken over by a body snatcher.
No. All right. So I think we should get into the game review now. So our overview, Days of Ire Budapest 1956, designed in 2016 by Catalin Nimmerfro and Mihaly Vince, with solo mode designed by the one and only David Turczi. Days of Ire Budapest 1956 tells the story of the revolution of Hungarian nationalists against the communist Soviet leadership and the SPA, essentially the local militia aligned with the Soviets. The game is played over 7 rounds, which represents the week of October 23rd to 30th, 1956, during which the revolution in the streets of Budapest took place. You win the game in one of 2 ways. You can immediately win on any round where all the Soviet and SPA units are removed from the game board. Good luck with that. Or at the end of 7 rounds of play, if you have successfully managed to remove event cards from the board so that there's only 4 or less on the board. Now, the solo mode is driven by the Zhukov deck, which is a solo AI deck that determines what events take place at the start of each day or round. And the solo player plays the role of the Hungarian revolutionaries, and you are opposed by the Soviet forces and the SPA forces as well.
Yeah, there are also tracks on the game board that keeping track of each side's support level among the Hungarian people, your morale, and the current round and day of the week. Now, at the start of each day, you draw and resolve 4 cards from the Zhukov AI deck. On each card are printed 3 possible events, but you're only going to choose to resolve one of these 3 events on each card, determined by the day of the week. So if it's round or day 1 or 2, you resolve the top event on the card. If it's day 3, 4, or 5, you resolve the middle event. And if it's day 6 or 7, you resolve the bottom event. And as you might imagine, the further you get into the days of the revolution, the tougher the events are to resolve. There's also an icon at the bottom of each card that directs you to place more event cards on the board. So basically, all these events are threats that you need to eliminate. Or sometimes this could actually help you. You discard the top card of the events deck, which means there are fewer events to place on the board. Then comes after you all that comes the revolutionary phase, where you, the human player controlling one character, performs at least 4 actions. You can control more characters, but the rules explicitly state the game gets significantly harder the more characters you control. So if it's your first couple of plays, you should definitely only play one character. And the rules state, I already said that. Actions include movement. Your first movement to an adjacent space is free. And then you have to give up cards from your hand for every additional space you want to move. You could activate a revolutionary unit. You could resolve an event by giving up the resources required to resolve that event. You could place a barricade that impedes your enemies from being able to freely move in and out of the space. Or you could defeat a Soviet tank. So that's something that you can do in the game. If you manage to show up at a location with a tank and you have 3 Molotov cocktails between you and your revolutionary comrades, you can actually destroy a tank, which is quite a rush. And then once you complete your actions, it's the SPA phase. SPA units adjacent to your space move toward your current space. There are snipers that move closer to your position, and more SPA units get placed on the board. So basically, this game gets harder the further in the week you play. So that's pretty much the kind of exhaustive overview of the game. We're into components now, are we? So, all
Yes,
right,
we are.
We're moving on to components. So here's what I think. The board, the main game board, that's the nicest component. It's a big kind of 6-folding game board. That was the highlight. In general, personally, I was disappointed with the component quality of this game. It's sad to say, because anyway, we'll get to that. The units are cardboard chits of different shapes. So it's kind of cool that they're different shapes. You can distinguish them from each other. So triangles for SPA units, square kind of chits for snipers, hex tokens for tanks. These are all, they get the job done, but they're not really, they don't really add to a nice table presence. So there's also revolutionary unit cardboard chits on the game board, and they have each one has a unique name, which is important because one of the keys to this game is you're kind of like developing, writing a narrative in your head as you're playing. At least that's how it was for me, Michael, and I don't know if that was your experience as well. And so it helped that I didn't have like a generic revolutionary at my side. I'm like
Right.
Mikhail and Ivan are with me at my side, and they've got Molotov cocktails, and we're going to go get a tank. So that was kind of cool, but there's no pictures of their faces, so it's very hard to kind of personalize them. Unlike speaking of David Thompson, when we reviewed By Stealth and Sea, he had pictures of each and every one of the crews of the submarine. So that really helped to kind of enhance the immersiveness, So I think that was a missed opportunity here. So overall, and then the last thing I'll mention is the cards. So the texture of the cards was weird to me in this game because if you look at them, they look like they are linen finish, which generally means it's a more deluxe, but they're also very thin. And they tend to stick to each other, so it was kind of hard to shuffle them, and they didn't really have a smooth kind of action against each other. So I don't know, like it was just weird. So I'm just getting a sense that the components were kind of on the budget side, and so that kind of brought it down for me. Michael, how did you feel about the components?
Well, I agree with you on the board. It's absolutely excellent. It's got 11 real life locations, which are they look like Polaroid pictures pinned to a cork board, and they got strings that tie to an actual location on a map, which is underneath it all. So it's really a nice immersive image. It's like you're looking at what the revolutionaries would be looking at if they were planning their moves and doing things. It's really cool. I had the chits and markers. I don't think they're that bad, though. As you said, I don't know why they just use that black silhouette. It doesn't make sense. And you mentioned David Thompson's By Stealth and Sea. He does that also for his Valiant Defense series, so Pavlov's House. Anytime they actually have access to a historical figure's image, they used it. And in this case, it's like, okay, are these just generic names? Like, is Alexia a real person, or did they just make this name up? If I saw a picture, then, like you say, we'd know if this is a real person, and it would feel a lot more real. So I agree with you totally there. And it's interesting that you say your cards stick together, because mine did not stick together at all. They were very smooth and very clean. And I even thought I should say something to Martin to see if this is his experience as well, but I didn't get a chance to. I can't shuffle worth a darn anyway. So I even made a post in the BG41 group about that. And I thought, what can I do here? But they slide really easily, which is unusual, because usually, and it might be because of that backing. I don't know. But in your case, that's interesting that you note that. So production, maybe not consistent. I don't know. My other pet peeve, the icons, like you said, they're super tiny, very hard to see, at least for me. I mean, the older I get, the harder time I have to see these kinds of things. I keep a magnifying glass next to my board game table just in case I need it. And something like that, if I can't see it clearly, it's just, that bugs me. I don't want to have to work, to see something.
100%. They were way too small, and there was so much space on the card. So I'm just like, these really didn't need to be this small at all.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, another addition, I did purchase the expansion pack to this, and I don't know if it's the only expansion. It's called Days and Nights Red Army Pack. Now, I bought that myself. I know that Stone Valley Games provided us each with a copy generously of Days of Fire, as well as Knights of Fire, but we'll get to that some other time. This particular expansion pack is cool because it has minis in it. So it's got militia, sniper, and tank units. And their bottoms are shaped the same as the tokens, strangely enough.
Yeah.
They're very nice, but there's a couple of things about them that I don't like. The first is that they're molded in this khaki color, which I would think just for theme, they should be red, because they're communist, or maybe some other color other than khaki. It just seems really generic. And the other two is the moldings are a little weird on the tanks, because their gun barrels just kind of droop. You need to fix that by putting it in hot water, or otherwise messing with it. And it's just putting it on the board like that. It's like, oh, he's got some issues there. So right. Yeah. It also comes with some extra scenario and leader cards, but the leader cards are used for the Knights of Fire game, which is similar to this one, but we can, again, talk about that later. And anyway, the scenario cards are used for Knights of Fire as well, but they help build a campaign game. So you can play from Days of Fire to Knights of Fire as one long game. So I couldn't do any of those. I haven't done any of those yet. So overall, regarding the base game's components, there's some good and some not good, so good choices. I think that the good outweighs the bad to an extent. Maybe, perhaps, kind of, but
well, I think your perception is a little bit different, because my perception would have been greatly enhanced if I had minis.
Okay, all right. Well, right. Yeah, I'm trying to look at this just from the base game perspective, though, from somebody who buys it. If they're going to be looking at those tokens, I like the militia tokens, dark brown, right, with a black silhouette. Can't even hardly see it. At least I can't. So it's kind of a weird choice. I don't know. Yeah, but the minis add to it. But again, you're talking an investment. So the game itself, the base game, I think runs $50 some. I didn't look it up on Stone Valley Games website, but I did see it on Amazon for that. And this cost me $38. So you're talking close to $100 of investment. Do you want to do that? Is it worth it? Up to you. But I think that the minis do add quite a bit to the game. Right. The snipers are especially scary, because they're so powerful. Let's talk about the rules.
Yeah, so the rules are a highlight here. I have to say, there's 3 rule books. When you open it up, there's 3 rule books in the box. There's the starter/appendix rule book. So essentially, it's like, hey, because the game has 2 modes of play. It's got the conflict mode, and it's got the Zhukov mode, right? And conflict is when you play multiplayer, and one player plays the Soviets, one player plays the revolutionaries, one player plays the SPA, I believe. I'm not really too clear on it, because obviously I played the solo, so I didn't really even look at the conflict rules. But the idea is, you can look at the starter rules just for game setup and stuff that is common between the conflict rules and the Zhukov rules. And then you can go right to the Zhukov rules for your solo / co-op play. So right off the bat, they're very well structured, the rules. The rule books themselves are very well organized. Um, I like rule books that have a good balance of text and pictures, and that the pictures make sense. They're not just decorative. These are actually like showing you what, kind of like a visual of what this text is referring to. They give lots of examples. There's very, very generous gameplay examples. And one of yours and my pet peeves, Michael, is sometimes the rulebook does a pretty good job, but then they forget the one-page turn sequence summary, usually at the back of the book. And this one doesn't. You get to the back of the book of the Zhukov rulebook, and then there's your one-page turn sequence summary, so that if you've gotten through the entire rulebook, then you can just refer to this one for quick, okay, what's next? Okay, great. And I don't need to go into the step-by-step unless I really need to. So I mentioned this on social media, and then David Turchi himself responded. I was giving him kudos. I'm like, hey, great solo design. The Zhukov deck is great, and the rulebooks are great. And David Turchi says he can't take all the credit because basically David wrote the rulebooks. Paul Grogan edited and gave feedback to the rulebooks. Paul obviously, he does a lot of solo playthroughs, and he edits a lot of rulebooks. But Mihaly Vince was, according to David, the one who really, really worked hard and implementing all of the feedback and all of the different passes to get these rule books to a nice level of polish, and it really shows. So I would say, these rule books are like a model for how it should be. So that's. But Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely agree. The organization of rules is super important, and reading the starter set was effortless, it seemed to me. The Zhukov set is a little meatier, of course, because it goes into greater detail, but it's really not that bad. It's not a lot to really get into. So the starting rulebook itself is 20 pages long, which sounds like a lot, but only 7 of them are dedicated to rules, and it's a super fast read. The rest of it, brief history of the revolution, explanation of the headlines on the cards in the Zhukov set. It gives you it's not necessary to read, but it gives you a little bit more insight into what's going on with that and what it means.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. It also offers some great perspective on the real life events that occurred and how that translates into the game's actions itself. The Zhukov's rule set is only 12 pages. Again, it seems like it's almost double the starter, but it's effortless to read. It's really simple. It's well organized, and it didn't feel like it took any time at all to go through it, which is really unusual. Usually I'm reading a war game rule book and I'm going, oh God, I've got 12 pages more of this to read. And this I was done with, and I was like, oh, that's it? Oh, okay. I guess I can play now. How about that? We can't talk about the conflict rule set because we didn't go into that. That's the multiplayer version. But I think it's a big win that they made these modes equal. Instead of saying, here's the rules and then here's the solo mode, they made them 2 separate standalone things, 2 separate books. Beautiful. I love it. It's great.
Yeah. So you don't feel like you're a second class citizen if you're playing the solo. If you buy this for solo, they definitely give equal, kind of honor to the solo as well as the multiplayer. So yeah, for sure.
So how about that gameplay? Well, in the solo version of Days of Fire, it's centered on you moving your fighter around the board, recruiting or activating other fighters, gathering resources via card draws as well as those fighters, and resolving events by spending those resources to meet each event's card's requirements. And as Martin mentioned earlier, the goal is to ensure there are 4 or less event cards on the board at the end of the game. If there are 5 or more, you lose. And as he also said, you can lose immediately, you can win immediately by clearing all enemy units from the board. I put lose there, incorrect. Clear all the enemy units, you win, which I think is impossible.
No, I don't see how that's possible. They're just taunting us.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's like a virus populating. It's just poof, all these units just suddenly come on the board at the end of every turn. It's crazy. So you can lose immediately if the moral track gets too low. Of course, you lose at the end of the game if there's too many events on there. There's a separate support track, which shows generally how the populace is leaning. It's either towards you, it's neutral, or it's towards the Soviets. This impacts how the game plays when you draw your Zhukov cards.
Right.
Each turn represents a day during that week in October of 56, and with a total of 7 turns or days in the game. For the Zhukov solo mode, each turn is divided into 3 different phases. You've got a Soviet phase, a revolutionary phase, and then the State Protection Authority or SPA phase. And in that Soviet phase, you draw 4 cards from your Zhukov deck, and you resolve each as they are drawn. Each of those cards has a color, as well as 3 separate headlines. So the color is going to determine, it comes from the supports track status. So it's, like I said, it's either green for you, neutral, or it's red for the Soviets. Whatever that color is, if there is one, will determine whether you go resolve a headline or if you go right to the events phase.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it for events there.
Yeah. Once that's done, the player moves, deals with events, activates revolutionary fighters, sort of like NPCs that add resources or fighting power to your character, or fight Soviet tanks, snipers, or militia. Which, like I said earlier, it's really a rush when you actually go up against a tank and defeat it.
It is kind of cool. Yeah.
But it's very, very hard to scrape 3 Molotov cocktails together to be able to take them out. The final phase, the State Protection Authority or SPA phase, is where the militia and snipers go after you and your revolutionary fighters. And it's likely that more militia will be generated here as well. Combat is brutal. Snipers are very powerful. Militia are not as powerful, but they can easily swarm you if you don't carefully plan your moves. Militia only move if the player's piece is adjacent. Snipers will come after you no matter what. You total the enemy's strength in the same space as a player's character is located, and the lower of the 2 dice is less than or equal to that enemy strength, you deal 1 hit. I believe if you have, I think you have a limit of 5 damage counters that you can collect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. It's 4, I think, in the multiplayer version. I can't remember what it said, but it is 5 in the solo mode for sure.
Yeah. If the sum of both dice is less than the total enemy strength, you deal 2 hits. Hits can be applied to your character or can remove an active revolutionary fighter instead. Combat the other way is different in that to attack a Soviet tank, you need 3, as I said, Molotov cocktail resources. And to attack militia, you need ammo. Each ammo resource allows you to knock off 1 militia piece. No die rolls required. I'll just say this about the gameplay. For me, it's basically a threat management game. It's basically a more involved version of Pandemic, right? Bad stuff is happening all over the board, and you have to figure out what's the most optimal way to use your very limited actions and your movement, where you're going to go, what resources you have with you, and then how are you going to, which way are you going to go to kind of resolve events? Bearing in mind that you're not only considering what you already have access to, but as you move, you could activate more revolutionary fighters who could potentially provide you with more things, right? And the kind of cool thing about that is that on each space, there are 2 revolutionary fighter kind of pieces. One of which is face down, so you don't know what they're providing. You don't know what resources they have with them. But one of which is face up, but is currently inactive. But at least so there's this kind of like a blend of there's tantalizing information along the way. So you could say, okay, well, right now I'm in this spot and I want to get to that other space 2 spaces away. But there's a tank there, but I only have 2 Molotov cocktails, so I don't have enough to be able to take it out. However, there's a space in between us where there's a fighter. He's inactive, but if I go there and use one of my actions to activate them, because you get by default 4 actions per turn, right? Then I could, activate that. That'll make it just enough, and then I will discard a card to be able to do an extra movement, and then I can try to take out the tank. So there's this kind of feeling of, which I love, right? The feeling of how do you move and where do you go to pick up things along the way to be able to do stuff that you didn't think you'd be able to do. So there's that, to me, is the kernel of the fun in there, as well as the kind of the narrative, right? It's like and then the rules, those kind of snippets of news items or insight into what actually happened historically in the rule books help with that. It's like, okay, I understand the importance of this plaza that we're in, this space on the board. I understand what happened there. There was a student protest there, and then it was broken up by and so you kind of get the game does a good job of immersing you into the events and the narrative of what's happening. So that's kind of like the value of the game to me. It just would have been enhanced if the components were better, in my humble opinion.
So let's look at the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Mhm.
Martin, how about you? What are your goods?
Well, we've already mentioned this. Really, really great rules, tense threat management gameplay that weaves a story as you play, and nice art and graphic design for the most part, especially on the main game board.
Agreed. I'd echo the rules. Outstanding. Should serve as an example of what to do in future published games, as you said, for sure. Now for the bad.
Well, I've already talked about the component quality. It doesn't feel, high quality, poor in general, except for that game board. For me, my experience, the cards don't shuffle well. And I could have used pictures, images of the revolutionary characters on the chits to enhance my immersion in the theme.
Right. Yep. Totally agree with all of those. I know I mentioned to you, it feels like it's worker placement. You're like, no, it's not worker placement. I'm like, well, you for sure know better because you're closer to those games. For me, it's like, well, it felt like that because you're moving or putting a character somewhere on the board so you can assign resources and resolve an event. And I just, at first, it didn't really click with me because I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing. I'm managing events and I've got these cloud of militia around me and these darn snipers who are very deadly. They're fine probably by themselves, but when you got more than that, you're really needing to be careful about how you move. And then it suddenly dawned with me, this is actually really tense and really fun. So, at first I wasn't a big fan, but so that might be something that happens to people as well that pick up this title. They might go, oh, this isn't all that great. Well, actually it's not, give it a chance. It's actually kind of fun. I agree that it was a miss they could have made it more historical by using actual images of participants other than Zukov, whose image appears on the cards. It might be possible that they just couldn't find any, maybe, I don't know, because sometimes that's hard, but I think to David Thompson's designs and they have no problem finding those images. So I don't know if that was maybe a rights thing. I don't know, but still absolute miss. Could have been much better with that. And I like I said, at first I wasn't certain this would have much appeal for me. It's fun. It's tight, easy to get into. Is it a keeper? I just don't quite know yet. I need to pair this with Knights of Fire and see how that plays and see how it works. So we'll see.
Yeah.
And
no, go ahead.
No, go for it.
No, I'm kind of there with you, right? And I was reflecting on this as well. It is not a bad game, but is it good enough to stand out and earn a spot in the regular rotation of games that will make it repeat trips to my table? No, I don't think so.
Right. Yep.
Yep.
So the ugly, I don't have any. How about you?
None for me.
And now for the stomp of approval.
And as Eric said, it's time for the stomp. The stomp discussion. Overall, great game, as you said. But as we mentioned, or as I mentioned, I don't know that it's necessarily for me long term. But even if it's not for me, I can still recognize if it deserves a stomp. And in this case, I would say no. There's just too many misses that can't be ignored. Great game. As we said, there's plenty of games that we think are great, but don't quite make the stomp. So in this case, it's a no for me. Martin?
The best part of this game is the rules, but a lot of more, as you said, more misses than hits. So I cannot in good conscience award it with the stomp of approval.
Well, folks, that's funny. It feels like we've kind of blown through this, but it's actually been over an hour. So how time flies. This wraps up episode 85 of the Solosaurus podcast. We're proud to be part of the Dice Tower Network.
It was actually episode 86, sorry.
86?
Yeah.
86. This wraps up... Let me do that again. This wraps up episode 86 of the Solosaurus podcast. And we are proud to be part of the Dice Tower Network. And for even more Solosaurus, join our post-show discussions and other shenanigans on Facebook at facebook.com/Solosaurus. Follow us on Instagram at Solosaurus Podcast or shoot us an email at solosauruspodcast@gmail.com. And I should mention, too, you can also go to YouTube and subscribe to the Solosaurus page there. And if you're interested in listening that way, I mean, we don't have video, but hey, it's a way to listen. So.
We are also on Board Game Geek under the podcasts and blogs section. The quickest way to find us there is just to go to your favorite search engine and type in Solosaurus BGG. And if you would like your very own Solosaurus micro badge to show off your support for Solosaurus podcast on Board Game Geek, hit me up on BGG. My handle is Dr. Henry Armitage. That's Dr. Henry Armitage, and I will spot you the Geek Gold for your very own Solosaurus micro badge.
Thanks again to Stone Valley Games, as always, for being our sponsor. And as always as well, if there's any particular games you'd like us to take a look at, send us an email or drop us a message on social media. As always, I'm Michael Eckenfels.
And I'm Martin Gonzalez.
Thank you for listening.